Okay.
Okay, all set. The sound? Yeah, all set.
Okay, Pandu, please, the mic is yours.
All right, can everyone see my screen? Is it working properly?
Yes.
All right. Good evening, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to our attendees joining us wherever you are tonight. My name is Pandu Megananda, and I will be your moderator for tonight's event. We have both a very exciting topic and also a speaker with us tonight, in which I am honored to introduce to you all in the next couple of slides. And so, without further ado, and to save time, let's get into it. First things first, we have a small webinar rule. Please write your name is registered and participants will be muted. And then the Q&A rule will be, we're gonna pull questions during the session for Q&A. And if you'd like to ask questions, please write them in the chat or Q&A at any moment, or you may also raise your hand, request to be unmuted, and one of us will unmute you sequentially. All right, so a little biography for our speaker, Mr. Eddie Chen. He is the Director of Professional Conduct Enforcement and Global Industry Standards at CFA Institute. He is he's responsible for the management of investigations related to alleged violations by CFA charter holders, members, and candidates in their professional activities. And Mr. Eddie is also responsible as the Asia Pacific Channel Manager, and he's also accountable for promotion of industry standards in the region. And as Channel Manager, he frequently collaborates with various investment industry stakeholders, including GIPS standard sponsors, large asset managers, asset owners, market regulators, local societies, and so on. Prior to joining CFA Institute, he was the head of finance for Audi Hong Kong, part of Volkswagen Group in Hong Kong as well, where he was responsible for financial operations, reporting, planning, and analysis. Mr. Eddie is a CFA charter holder, a CIPM designation holder, a certified management accountant, and an MBA graduate from York University in Toronto. And lastly, Mr. Eddie also holds a postgraduate degree in law from Hong Kong University and passed the qualifying exams for Hong Kong attorneys. Just a heads up for all charter holders here tonight, you will receive one additional professional learning credit for attending this webinar. Mind you again that this only applies for charter holders, not candidates. We will give certificates to participants who take part in the webinar all the way to completion. And to get a certificate, please complete the Google form on the link that we will send via the chat box throughout the webinar. And here's the example of the certificate. It looks very, very good. And then I would like to hand the stage over to Mr. Eddie. However, before he starts his part, we have a little message from AIA as one of the adopters, promoters of GIPS. Mr. Eddie, you may take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Like Pandu said, let's just watch a short clip, which could serve as, I would say, an from AIA Group Limited, an insurance organization based here in Hong Kong. The speaker in the clip is Mr. Mark Conan, and he is the Group CIO at AIA. And let's hear what he had to say about firm's journey to complying with the GIPS standards. Now, let me share the screen here. Okay, there. Apparently my share screen button doesn't really work. So, okay, so for some reason, the screen button doesn't work here, which is very odd. Okay, so let's try again. It worked earlier.
Were you having some sort of difficulties?
What is this? Okay, well, let me try this. Okay, so there. Whew, so that was embarrassing. There we go. Now I am going to click play here. So Let's start.
And what drives credibility? Doing what you say you're going to do and then delivering the results. So I recognized early on that if we were going to set ourselves targets and then report to those targets, people had to believe that the numbers that we were presenting were bona fide, were reliable. So early on, I realized that by adopting GIPS standards internally here at AIA, I would get more buy-in from my various stakeholders, because then the need or the tendency to question the investment results, the numbers that we were presenting, would go away, because they would be effectively adhering to international best practice standards, and I could move on and really get into the detail with my stakeholders. So the process really started with selling the concept first, and some of your colleagues who work at the CFA helped me with that. Then we figured out that how we were going to become GIPS compliant. And then I realized that this wasn't just about being able to demonstrate best practice. It really was an overhaul from top to bottom of our data requirements, because by forcing us through a GIPS standards verification process, we needed to clean up and standardize and make all of our data consistent from front to back. For anyone that's thinking of, as an asset owner in particular, anyone who's thinking of embarking on this journey, you need a few things in place to make it work. You need senior sponsorship, number one, and that came from me. And I also worked with the CEO of the whole group to make sure that he was aware of what this was about, so that it became part of his messaging when he was giving updates in terms of what's new across the group. You know, until people understand what the purpose is, it feels like a compliance process, that's something that is being asked of them, but they don't really get it while you're doing it. So what we realized after about 2 or 3 months, that GIPS is not just about the actual logistical challenge of getting the verification, the technical challenge. It's also about the governance around everything you do. So what we realized was that GIPS had to be fully integrated into our investments governance framework. I think then the relevance of GIPS, if you like, the coin dropped. People understood what the purpose was. And this was like, oh, I see, we're using GIPS as a way of reinforcing our governance, our data governance, the way in which we calculate performance, the way in which we communicate performance, the way in which we manage the use of indexes for benchmarks. Once they got that, then they saw that actually this is really helpful. Firstly, on the cultural side, we have operating principles here of doing the right thing in the right way with the right people, and the right results will come. GIPS is all about that. It's all about the transparency and making sure you've got the consistency, and it's externally verified. So we hold ourselves up to the highest standards, and we're willing to get that verification because we're confident that we do things in the right way, and that's what's going to drive the right results. And then it talks to the cultural aspect, which I think you've mentioned, Ian, which is, you know, if you're willing to do that and adopt global best practice just on the way in which you calculate and communicate the output of what you do, then it speaks volumes for everything else that you do and how you do it. You know, I'm passionate about this because, you know, you do, you know, see different shades of cynicism in the financial sector, you know, and I think it's, if you don't aspire to adopting best practices and standards, global standards, if you don't do that, you're really opening yourself up to that cynicism, that you become self-serving, you become, you know, manipulative in the way that you report what you do. And I think we've got to move away from that. We've got, as a profession, you know, the biggest criticism, I think, within fund management, whether it's within an asset owner or an asset manager, biggest criticism is, as a profession, we've not done enough to really professionalize what we do and the behaviors which we require in order to deliver those professional outcomes. So for me, GIPS was all about that.
All right. So that was the message from Dr. Conan, and I hope that was clear. Just before I dive into my slides, I just wanted to mention 2 points that Dr. mentioned. First is about how GIPS standards and adopting the GIPS standards have helped his firm improve the governance within the firm in all aspects. And then the second thing is about culture, a culture of best practices and culture of policies and procedures. So let's dive into the main topic, which is the 2020 edition of the standards. Now, let me go to my slides. I have to try to share my screen again. So let me, okay, let me go to the right screen. This gotta be it. All right. All right, so let's not waste any time here. So today's topic is the 2020 edition of the GIPS standards. Next slide here. Okay, let me move this out of the way here. All right, so let's get this technical stuff out of the way. So first of all, what are the GIPS standards? So in a nutshell, the GIPS standards are voluntary standards to help the investment industry to standardize the methodologies to calculate and to present historical investment performance. The GIPS standards have been around for quite a long time, 20 plus years. If we include its predecessor, the GIPS standards have been around for close to 30 years. The GIPS standards are developed, maintained, and promoted by the CFA Institute. We don't do it alone. These are, the standards are product of a lot of collaborations between GIPS standard sponsors around the world, a lot of volunteers who dedicated their free time to help develop, draft, and create the standards. These volunteers, they are industry practitioners. They have a lot of experience in the investment industry, and they know what they're doing. And they know what would make the best practice in their field. And at the same time, CFA Institute staff, including my colleagues in the industry standards team. By establishing standardized requirements for calculating and presenting performance, the GIPS standards make it possible for investment managers of different firms to compete on an equal footing in all markets because it eliminates the practice of cherry picking. It eliminates whether managers do it consciously or not. By following standards to calculate and present investment performance, everyone's on equal footing. They are presenting what they have to present because the standards said so. At the same time, the GIPS standards make it possible for investors to compare past performance of investment managers fairly and transparently because they are seeing results and outcomes and investment outcomes that are calculated according to the same methodologies. At the same time, asset owners such as pension funds and a family office or insurance organizations, they can fully disclose and fairly present performance to oversight bodies and stakeholders. So it not just helps asset managers, but it also helps asset owners to standardize methodologies to calculate and to print investment performance. So why do we need reporting standards in the first place? So let's look at some of the reasons listed here. without standards for presenting and calculating investment performance, some asset firms may be tempted to present to their prospective customers, prospective clients, their best performance. They want to shine the best light on their past performance. They might be showing them model portfolios or simulation portfolios, and they might be showing they might showing back testing portfolio results, and that's not consistent, and that is not fair to the prospective clients, and at the same time fair to other asset firms who might be doing things more transparently. So GIPS standards help provide equal footing. At the same time, there is a lack of regulatory guidance on how to
Eddie,
calculate.
sorry, Eddie.
Yep.
We are hearing echo from you.
Is that right? Is this better now? I don't know what's wrong. Maybe is it still echoing? Now, is it still echoing?
On my end, it doesn't really echo that bad, to be honest.
Okay. I'll try to. Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better now. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, perfect. I didn't do anything different. I don't know what's happening. Okay, so go back to the fact that there is a lack of regulatory guidance for calculating and presenting performance. And in many markets, in most markets around the world, there is only the reliance on self-regulation of the industry. And self-regulation, by self-regulation, I mean basically, doing the best practice, doing what's best according to the industry standards, and that's when CIPM comes in, and or GIPS standards will come in to help fill in that gap. So that is these are reasons why there is a need for reporting standards. If the audio doesn't work, just yell out, because I couldn't really see your faces. All right, so on slide, I have listed some reasons why firms comply with the GIPS standards. And first one, when a firm commit to comply with the GIPS standards, they are demonstrating that they have a commitment to follow global industry standards and best practices for valuation and performance calculation and presentation. That also demonstrates their commitment to consistent, transparent, and comparable methods of calculating and presenting performance. The journey to comply with the GIPS standards require the firm to go through their internal policies and procedures. And that means when they get to the point of compliance, they would have established a robust set of performance policies and procedures, so that going through that process, they would have cleaned up their internal governance requirements. A claim of compliance may also improve the chances of firms being selected or hired by a prospective client. At the same time, whether they are GIPS standards compliant is usually one of the first questions in an RFP. So that also increases their chance of being hired by an asset owner. Okay, so this slide lays out the 60 plus standard sponsors around the world. I mentioned earlier that CFA Institute develops and create and create with a lot of partners to develop the GIPS standards. And I mentioned the GIPS standard sponsors. So this, you can tell from the slide that it is truly global. It is truly stretches across continents. And I highlighted the GIPS standard sponsored for Indonesia, which is CFA Society Indonesia. So we have had a long working relationship together, and we're grateful for CFA Society Indonesia's support in this effort. All right, so the next slide talks about, are firms or asset owners required to comply? The answer is no. It's not required, by law. But there is a reason why we are promoting this, and there is a reason why firms decide to go through that exercise to comply with GIPS standards. What I'm trying to say here on this slide is that standard setters like CFA Institute, we observe, research, and we work with industry practitioners to come up with what's best for the industry, what are the best practices for the industry, and we codify it. We put them into standards. At the same time, regulatory authority, they frequently recognize and enforce industry standards through their statutory powers. At the same time, they are not the expert of the industry, so they usually rely on the expertise of the industry to come up with any guidance or requirements in their regulations, in legislation, in their legislations, and in drafting their regulations. So both work together, sort of back and forth. We provide the information, we provide the expertise, we engage with them to help them with policies, and at the same time, the regulator would they might start with their own initiative, but they will also come to us for advice and expertise. Typically, regulators do not mandate compliance with the GIPS standards. I am not aware of any jurisdictions around the world that have made it mandatory. However, some regulators are clamping down on misrepresentation or false advertising. The most active one is actually in the US. They have the longest history in GIPS standards promotion. So it's no surprise that the SEC in the US would be the most active in clamping down on advertising, meaning that if they find out, or if they've been reported that certain firms falsely claim that they are standards compliant, meanwhile they are not, then SEC would contact them, or they would reach out to them to find out what's happening. If they don't quit their advertising, SEC would take further action to fine them or sue them, take them to court. And it had actually happened. Not that many cases, but there are a couple of prior cases in that regard. Again, many regulators look to GIPS standards to inform and to get information about how to draft rules and regulations for their market. So we have provided that platform for them. Oversight of the GIPS standards. CFA Institute does not test whether a firm's claim of compliance is accurate or not. We only provide the guidance. We explain how the rules work, how the provisions work, but we do not test it. We do not have an enforcement division at CFA Institute to do that. CFA Institute works together with regulators such as SEC. Like I mentioned earlier, SEC would have from time to time different consultation paper in different areas, and they would invite industry practitioners to submit their feedback on the consultation paper. Most recently, there is a marketing rule issued by the SEC, and before the marketing rule came out, CFA Institute provided a lot of feedback, and SEC referred to its standards many times in their findings. So that testament to how impactful or how influential, I should say, GIPS standards is on the market. That's it for this slide. Okay, so when I say the 2020 GIPS standards, what I meant is the latest edition of the GIPS standards were issued and published in year 2020, which is a year and a half or so from now, as of now. The previous edition was actually issued in 2010, so almost 10 years in between. You know, there's a gap, 10 years from the prior version. So there was a need to update GIPS standards to make it more to keep pace with the changing industry, especially in some asset classes like alternative investment and alternative strategies space. In 2010, that space have not matured so much, whereas by the year 2020, alternative strategies have become such a mainstream space that a lot of portfolios would already have exposure to those. So by 2020, it is much more relevant for these asset classes. At the same time, the 2020 edition had made the standards more relevant for pooled funds. I'll explain that in more details in later slides. Generally, by pooled funds, I mean like broadly distributed pooled funds like mutual funds or UCITS in the EU. So those are widely distributed, heavily regulated pooled funds. At the same time, 2020 edition made it more applicable for asset owners. There is now actually a separate chapter called GIPS for asset owners, so that asset owners can refer to this chapter directly, and they can find rules and provisions that are more relevant to them. Same time, between the 10 years, there have been a lot of guidance statement that has been issued kind of piecemeal here and there. So the 2020 edition had consolidated all this guidance into one place, make it easier for practitioners to refer to. All right, GIPS standards handbook. It's a very, very helpful resource for any practitioner if they want to learn about the GIPS standards, if they want to implement the GIPS standards. The handbook provides all the guidance in details, section by section, and they are free for download online. I won't go into details right here, but just so you know, there is a handbook, like a guidance handbook. So it's literally take you by the hand to understand every single provision. Okay. So compliance with the GIPS standards. All right, so I'm going to go a little bit further into the technical side of the GIPS standards. I said earlier, compliance is voluntary, but there are a lot of benefits to complying. I mentioned the commitments, how it demonstrates commitments of your firm to your clients and prospective clients. At the same time, there are things to pay attention to when a firm wants to consider starting the journey to comply with the GIPS standards. First of all, any investment management firm with actual assets under management may choose to comply with the GIPS standards. So there's no limit to, who, I should say, the limit is very small. Basically, any firm with actual AUM, they can choose to comply with the GIPS standards. When a firm decide to pursue compliance with the GIPS standards, they would have to comply with all the applicable requirements. They cannot just choose, bits and pieces. They cannot say they have a partial compliance with the GIPS standards. It doesn't work that way. It had to be all or nothing. It had to be all of the applicable requirements. That includes all the updates, all the guidance statements, interpretations, and Q&As, and all the interpretations that are mentioned in the GIPS standards handbook, and everything that is published on the GIPS standards website. It might sound like a lot, but it's just to show the concept that it's all applicable requirements. Meanwhile, a lot of these resources are just additional information. They're not additional requirements. They're just additional explanations to help the practitioner to understand what it actually means by, the rule, the provision. And the compliance must be on a firm-wide basis, meaning they cannot say that it's only compliant for this department or for this clientele. They comply, they are complying for the whole firm. And I think I will talk about what it means to be a firm, or the definition of a firm in a later slide. So this is just a repeat. Like I said, they cannot say that oh, we are compliant with the GIPS standards except for certain parts. That doesn't work. There is no partial compliance. It has to be all or nothing. Okay, so just a little bit of background information for you. When firms are ready to claim compliance, they will need to fill out a notification form, which is available online. It comes back to us. That is just to help us keep track of which firms are claiming compliance and some basic information, so it's easier for us to understand what firms are claiming compliance around the world. And they would have to do the notification form initially when they first claim compliance, and also every year between, basically every year in the first half of the year, between Jan 1st to June 30th of each subsequent year. And also there is there's an option to choose whether they want to be listed on the website. Most firms would want to be listed on the website because it is an accomplishment. It is a commitment. It is something to be proud of, to advertise. Usually the entity that decide not to be listed, usually like sovereign funds that don't want to be providing some of the perhaps confidential information about their country, about maybe the sovereign funds size, etc. So that's usually, involves sensitive information, but usually this doesn't apply to asset firms or asset managers. Okay, so going back to the definition of a firm. So let me take a few minutes to talk about what it means. So when firms to embark on this journey, the first thing they would want to do is to think about how to define their firm. For example, like let's say for multinational investment firms, they might have operations in different countries and jurisdictions and markets, they would have different ways to define their firm. They could decide that they only want to define. They could decide that they just want to comply with the GIPS standards for example. I'm just saying this, like for example, ABC firm, but only the Singapore operation. I'm just like making this up. They could do that. They could decide that they want to only claim compliance for the Singapore operation, maybe because they already have robust policies and procedures, and that might be different from their operations in, for example, in Malaysia. Maybe they are based in Malaysia, but they have operation in Singapore. And so it's really flexible that way, but they would have to make that decision and stick to that decision. So that is one of the criteria. And I listed here in the bullet, the firm must be defined as an investment firm or a subsidiary or a division is held out to clients or potential clients as a distinct business entity. So in my example, I'm saying, okay, the country division. So that would be that they can carve that out, say, okay, we're only claiming compliance for that operation. They can also decide to do so by, for example, the client type. If they have a very distinct way distinguishing between institutional clients or retail clients, and they have very different function and hierarchy, they can also do that. As I said in the slide, distinct business unit, a distinct business entity is a unit or division or department or office that is organizationally and functionally segregated from other units. So it could be, like I said, from geographically, country by itself, or functionally, it could be, like I said, client type, the clientele. You can say institutional, retail, etc. So it's quite flexible, but that decision, once decided, they have to stick to it. And also pay attention to the fact that that particular distinct business entity must retain discretion over assets, the assets that they manage. They should have autonomy over the investment decision-making process. Right. Okay. So, some example here. It could be, like I said, it could be legal entity. Like in my example, might be the Singapore Limited Company Limited. So that could be a legal entity and just claim compliance for that particular entity, or it could be a client type. Oh, I already mentioned that. The firm must document and disclose how it is defined for the purpose of complying with the GIPS standards. And once decided, they have to stick to it because it's documented and it cannot change from time to time. It's once decided, they have to stick to it. So that's that. The last point is insignificant. Okay, so maybe I have to go back here actually. Firm definition determines the assets that must be used to calculate the total firm assets. Total firm assets is a concept in the GIPS standards, which I will go into in the next slide. So what I'm trying to say is total firm assets measure the total amount of all the firm assets that is being managed by the entity. And that goes into the slide here. All of these assets have to be included to calculate what it means by total firm assets. It has to be all the assets for which the firm has either conditional or unconditional authority to trade the assets. It has to include all the fee-paying and non-fee-paying assets. It would also have to include all the assets that are assigned to a sub-advisor when the firm has discretion over the selection of the sub-advisor. All right, and all of these have to be must be equal to the aggregate fair value of all assets managed by the firm. However, the total firm assets would exclude assets within the advisory only relationships, meaning they're only for advice. They don't have the discretion to make trades or the authority to make trades. If they are advisory only, then that gets excluded from total firm assets. Let me talk a little bit about the track record that needs to be presented for GIPS compliance. So for investment firms or asset firms, they would need to have at least 5 years of track record before they can claim compliance. Unless the firm has been around for less than 5 years, then if that's the case, then since firm inception, then they would have to start building up a track record for 10 years. And then they can start rolling off the older years. Then they would keep reporting 10 years of track record. For asset owners, just for your information, it's a lot easier. The minimum number of years track record, it's only 1 year. And it could be less than 1 year if the asset owner has been around for less than 1 year. And then after that, they also would build up to 10 years track record and then start rolling the older years and keep 10 years on the report. Okay, so I'll spend some time to talk about the different portfolio types, and that would drive the requirements for GIPS standards. First of all, there are segregated accounts. Those are portfolio that are owned by a single client. And then the second category of portfolio would be broadly distributed pool funds. I mentioned these are usually heavily regulated public funds, like mutual funds or CIPM funds. And they are usually not sold on a one-to-one presentation. Meaning, an investor could buy into the funds by subscribing or by signing up online. There is no one-on-one presentation. So these are most of them are already regulated to protect the public interest. The third category is limited distribution fund, pool funds, and these are usually these are actually pool funds that are not broadly distributed. So examples would be limited partnership, private equity funds, hedge funds, and these are usually more high stake, and they're usually sold or promoted through one-on-one presentation. So usually, I guess there is no hard rules, but usually these are marketed to more sophisticated investors or institutional investors. So usually the threshold would be the threshold for risk tolerance might be higher. Like they're usually more risk tolerant. Okay, so composites versus pool funds. There is a concept of composites in the GIPS standards. I usually like to visualize it like, like buckets, of the same strategies, of the same investment strategies, and for all those segregated accounts with the same strategy, they would be included in this composite, like dump it in this bucket, and then you consolidate them, and then you look at the performance of the composite to see how well they perform over a period of time. So composite is It's like that visually. So they are required for strategies that are offered in a segregated account format, meaning like I'm making this up, like US mid cap as a strategy. For example, different clients would have part of their portfolio invested in US mid cap. Then all of these US mid cap portfolios would have to be grouped together in a composite and then consolidated to look at how they perform and then do the calculation, present the results according to the GIPS standards requirements. At the end of the day, then you can look at the performance of all the US mid-cap strategies. So that would be the idea. For pooled funds, depending on broadly distributed or limited distribution funds, they would have different reporting requirements. For pooled funds that are for broadly distributed pool funds, if that strategy is not offered to client as a segregated account, then there is no need for a separate report. The reason is the broadly distributed pool funds, like a mutual fund, already regulated heavily, and there would be requirements for them to present their performance in a particular way already. So there's no need to create another report just to fulfill the requirement for GIPS standards. However, if that broadly distributed pool fund, if that strategy is offered to some clients, segregated accounts, then that would have to be included in that particular composite. It must be included in that composite to calculate the overall performance for that particular strategy. Okay, the last point is basically the same as what I said about broadly distributed pool funds. If it's not offered to clients as a segregated account, in the 2010 requirement, we need them to create a composite to hold that. But now in 2020, they can actually terminate that composite because that's no longer needed. All right. The GIPS reports. Okay, this is I just wanted to talk about what are the reporting requirements for GIPS composite and also for GIPS pooled fund. I already mentioned that for composite, the firm must present these reports to their clients and prospective clients according to a particular format. And these formats are actually in the GIPS standards in the appendix section as a reference. What I'm trying to say is that for GIPS composite report and also the GIPS pooled fund report, they have different requirements in terms of frequency and also in terms of what information must be included in the particular report. I won't go into details for GIPS composite report, but I will quickly refer you to the right side of the here. There's a sample of pooled fund report using time-weighted returns. As you can see, they must include things like gross, the fund's gross return, a benchmark return next to it, the gross returns standard deviation, the benchmarks standard deviation, the fund assets in terms of dollar value, and also the firm assets in terms of dollar value. So all of these would be explained in more details in the actual GIPS standards book and also in the handbook, handbook. So in the interest of time, I'm going to only talk
Sorry
about
to cut you short. It seems that we only have about 10 minutes because we're going to open the floor for Q&A at 7:30.
Okay. Okay. Maybe I just talk. How many questions do we have so far? Just gauging.
So far we only have one question, unfortunately, but
Okay,
I believe
okay.
more will come
Okay,
as you close the presentation. Don't worry.
Okay. Okay. So maybe I'll just talk another 4 minutes. Just go over some of the highlights. Okay.
No, you actually still have 10 minutes, so
Okay.
I'll give you some heads up again. Don't worry.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. All right. So very quickly, time-weighted returns and money-weighted returns. These are basically different ways to calculate the returns using different methodologies. The time returns is the I would say the leading, but the most prominent required methodology. It is designed to reflect the change in value. It negates the effects of any external cash flows, especially for funds that have a lot of cash inflow and outflow. Time-weighted return will actually eliminate the impact of the cash inflows and outflows. Whereas money-weighted return, it's a simpler way to calculate the return, but it could be influenced by the cash flows, external cash flows transactions. However, in the newest GIPS standards edition, there are more exceptions as to when money-weighted returns could be used. It's all outlined in the GIPS standards. The reason I bring that out is because a lot of alternative strategies might favor money-weighted return because of the fact that a lot of their assets are illiquid, and they prefer mid returns because it's easier to calculate, and maybe a lot of their illiquid assets, it's not so easy to get a timely valuation. So just wanted to point that out to you. So it makes it more accessible to use the money-weighted return methodology. So I might skip this slide. It just gives you detail of that. I'm sharing these slides. Don't worry about this. You will get all these contents and information. Theoretical performance, there must be presented as supplemental information, and they must be disclosed with all these extra information so that the reader would not be misguided. Those are provisions and guidance that would be mentioned in the GIPS. The reason for that is to make sure, it's to protect the interests of the investors. Advertising guideline, in a nutshell, GIPS standards provide a very standard terminology on how to advertise a firm's compliance with the GIPS standards, so that there is no, it helps eliminate any misrepresentation or misuse or misguided statements. So it makes it more consistent. That's all. Verification is a concept. I'll just take a minute to talk about this. Just think about this as firms creating or developing and drafting financial statements. And they would usually get auditors to audit them, a second pair of eyes, professionally looked at. It's sort of the same idea. So when a firm claims compliance with the GIPS standards, they can get an independent verifier to look at their claim of compliance to make sure that they, in fact, followed all the criteria, tick off all the boxes, and that's called verification. And that is something that is a concept in GIPS standards, and it could only be carried out by independent third-party verifiers, and the verifiers must be qualified to do that. Just more verification. I think I will skip these, and very quickly, I think I'll just remind everybody that the GIPS standard is not only for asset firms, it is also available for asset owners to consider. Asset owners also would have their performance presentation, and they have, they're responsible for, they're responsible to their oversight bodies and the stakeholders. So asset owners could also claim compliance with the GIPS standards. So, AIA as an insurance organization is a great example. They do so as an asset owner, and they, Mark talked about how it transformed their firm. So that's just testament in itself. So these are list of big asset owners around the world that is currently claiming compliance with the GIPS standards. On top of the list is AIA. Okay, I'll skip all these. These are just examples. Lastly, there are a lot of resources for GIPS standards or learning about the GIPS standards. Me, it would be your greatest contact. You can always send me email if you have any questions. If you want to embark on the journey to claim compliance, I am the person to reach out to in this region. There are just a lot of resources more about it. And I think that's pretty much it. Oh, newsletter. The GIPS Standards newsletter is a great way to learn about, keep up to date with changes of the GIPS standards or new findings, new tips about the GIPS standards. And if you sign up to it, it's free of charge. All you have to do is to go to the standards.org website and subscribe to it. That's my contact and email address, and staying here. And that is the end of my very rushed presentation. I hope you got something out of it. Let me stop the sharing and let me go to the chat box to see what kind of questions we got there.
Eddie, actually, you still have about 12 minutes left, so you still have, I would say, some time if you feel like you've rushed some parts that you would like to highlight or that are important for the audience. So we have decided to give you some more time if you'd like, right, Barahman?
Okay, yep. I feel like I rushed it in a very graceful way, so I think I could go to the question first, and anyone feel the need to ask further question, I'm here. So
maybe
let's go to
yes. So we're gonna move to the Q&A, Barahmat, or
Yeah, go ahead with the Q&A. If anyone want to ask a question, they can unmute themselves because we have a small group.
Yes, maybe I'll, as a moderator, I'll just start off with some very basic, very broad questions. Why do you think are the GIPS standard relevant, and why do companies use them actually?
That's a great question. I think it's especially for investment firms. I think it really is a badge of honor. It's sort of like a badge of commitment. When everybody else is GIPS standards compliant, and if you're not, you yourself at a disadvantage, especially in markets that are more competitive. I'm talking about US, the UK, a lot of the traditional markets. When you talk about RFPs, a lot of those RFPs would have a checkbox. They would have the first question on the P would be, are you GIPS compliant? And if you're not in those situations, you get tossed aside already. Like you didn't get through the first meeting. So I think it's it's definitely something that has developed, I should say, evolved over time. When more and more firms are compliant, then you sort of want to be on par with them to stay competitive. So that is why it's relevant in that regard.
I see. So, you can safely testify that the trend has become obvious. More and more firms are starting to adopt, GIPS compliant for the benefit of them and their client as well.
That's right. That's right. And I remember having a chat with CIC in Singapore, a huge asset owner, and
Government Investment
I
Corporation.
remember. Correct. And they obviously, have a lot of assets to, they hire a lot of asset managers to help them with managing the assets. And I remember the lady that I talked to, she said it's a given, especially for the traditional strategies, it's a given that if they wanted to, manage our assets, they have to be GIPS compliant. It might not be the case a few years back for alternative strategies, but for traditional strategies, she said it's a given. If you're not GIPS compliant, you don't make second round. I mean, it's as blunt as that, and I remember that, and it was really insightful.
I see. So I'm guessing what better time to adopt GIPS than now, isn't it?
Exactly. To also to stay, not only to stay competitive, but at the same time expand to other markets. If you wanted to start expanding the business to other jurisdictions, GIPS standards give you that ticket, because it's globally recognized, and it's not to just one jurisdiction, it's a global standard. So that certainly gives you an advantage for that.
I see. That's a very, very interesting take. Again, I would like to remind our attendees tonight, if you have any question, even the most basic or simplest one, don't hesitate. Just have your question typed in the chat box, and I shall address them sequentially. We have our first, and unfortunately for now only, question from Bu Siti Rahmawati. She is asking basically, how is the progress of asset owners GIPS compliance in other APAC countries? That's the first question. The second question would be, what are the key drivers? Is it regulator? Is it beneficiary? Or what about other factors?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Let me tackle the first part of the question. What is the problem for other asset owners pursuing GIPS compliance in APAC countries? The quick answer is slow for asset owners. To be honest, AIA is the big win. We are very happy that AIA decided to pursue compliance with the GIPS standards, and it's no easy task. I'm not gonna lie. AIA admitted to that. AIA talked about the mistake they had made, and how they had to start the project, and how the whole journey takes a couple of years, and it requires commitment from different departments and also from senior management to push through the project through all the related departments to transform the entire firm into a GIPS compliance organization. There's a study actually available on the website. It talks about their whole experience and how different departments have struggled with the requirements and how they overcome the challenges, and how they came out on the other side, become a better department, become better, to have better accountability, to have better reporting, to have better integrity in the numbers that they report. So I might have digressed a little bit, but what I'm trying to say is one of the reasons why asset owners have not on to claiming compliance is because it takes commitment from the top, and also commitment to go through the entire marathon project. It takes not months; it could take a year or two. However, the results the transformation is so stunning that they don't regret through that the period. Mark in the video talked about how it transformed the organization, how they came out better. Every department is following best practices, and he even touched on how the culture of the organization have changed after claiming compliance with the GIPS standards. Another part I want to talk about is even though in APAC countries, asset owners have not just yet, rushing to claim compliance, we do see an increase in asset owners claiming compliance in other regions. We see more in the US. A lot of the pension fund boards in the US are catching on. Besides CalPERS, which have already claimed compliance for a few years, several years, there are states that are following suit. A lot of teachers, pension plans and schemes, they hold huge amount of assets, and they are becoming GIPS compliant for the fact that they see the benefit and advantage of being GIPS compliant. The second part of the question, what are key drivers? I'd say I can think of a couple of main reasons, but I would say that competition is definitely one main key driver, because they see their peers are starting to claim compliance. Then will ask themselves, what are we doing? Should we be looking at this? When other states or maybe like their counterpart is doing that, then they might look into their own internal governance and start learning about the GIPS standards. And one more thing I want to point out is the fact that once asset owners start looking into GIPS standards, they realize how easy it is, because they might already have a lot of the policy place. They might be following a lot of the procedures already, and the fact that asset owners only have to have track record of 1 year to begin GIPS compliance, rather than the 5 years requirement for firms. So they realize that we're already halfway there. Why don't we just actually to work and get over to the other side and claim compliance? So that is another driver for GIPS, for asset owners to consider GIPS standards as their reporting standards.
That is a very, very comprehensive and elaborate answer, Eddie. I would like to remind our attendees again, if you have any questions, the most basic or the most simplest one, don't hesitate to have them type in the chat box. And again, if you would like to get the certificate, please register on the link that we have provided in the chat box. At the moment, we don't have any further question from the audience, but maybe if you'd like to share, your experience from some firms that have recently adopted GIPS,
sorry, Pandu. Just now, I think Reski Laksana raised her hand.
Okay, I didn't see that. Yeah, but you're feel free to unmute yourself.
No, sorry, I was giving reaction. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so that means you don't have any question? Okay. Yeah, I was just saying we still have about 15 to 20 minutes of time. Maybe Eddie, you would like to share, some insights from some firms that have recently adopted, GIPS, maybe their insights, their experience. I'm pretty sure, as you exactly said, it could get a bit cumbersome, but at the end of the day, it's extremely worth it and it pays off handsomely.
Yes, absolutely. I keep talking about AIA because it's such a remarkable journey that they had gone through. However, AIA had claimed compliance as an asset owner, so that might be a little bit different in terms of parallels to other asset
Okay.
firms. So I would point to the fact that a lot of asset firms, when they start to consider GIPS compliance, they usually would ask why. Why do we want to put ourselves through that? So I would say the driving force is most firms would do that because they want to stay competitive. It's because they want to expand to other markets and compete for business. And they might they might realize that they are at a disadvantage because they are competing with other firms that are compliant, especially those firms that are international firms that have operations in multiple countries. Then they would be GIPS compliant for many years because they have gone through the process already, and then they are most competitive because they are already there and they stay competitive. Whereas firms that are trying to get to that level or compete in that space, they would have to get the same tickets. So that might be the driving force. That might be the incentive or motivation for them to do so. I would say I would to the audience here, if your firm had any desire to learn more about the GIPS standards and or consider claiming compliance with the GIPS standards down the road, please think about this. Think about the possibilities and also the potential to become more competitive. On a global equal footing with other firms. And don't be alarmed or don't be put off by the fact that there's so much information out there. Just reach out. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm reaching out to you to let you know that I'm there to answer questions. I'm same time, almost the same time zone. I'm in APAC and I'm here to help you. That's why I'm here. I'm here speaking to you to help understand and to help you. I guess any questions about this topic.
Great. And I think in the best interest of time, and also since I do not see any more question, it's better for us to close this very interesting webinar tonight. But maybe one last, if you have any, closing remarks. I'm pretty sure our attendees tonight have so many questions, but it's just that, it could be their first time that they've come across this. So I'm pretty sure, they just need some time to learn the whole content, and maybe, they're going to get back to you. But for the next couple of minutes, if you have some closing remarks, or maybe if you'd like to share your contact again.
Yeah, sure. I would make it short. I would definitely, yes, I am reachable, from the email that is on the slide, which I will share with the audience here. The CFA Society Indonesia will be sending this out later, maybe tomorrow morning. One point, I guess one takeaway I'd like you to consider is that claiming compliance with the GIPS standards. I understand it sounds like a big endeavor, and that it sounds like it's a project that is challenging, but at the same time, I'd say to you that all firms, everyone would feel the same. It's like I guess it's like learning a musical instrument. Everyone might feel overwhelming in the beginning, but it takes some practice and some learning, and it helps to learn from other people's experience, and that is the reason why I want to bring out the fact that at the AIA case study, which will be shared to you also tomorrow morning, or maybe later tonight. It's a PDF file. It's a case study that talks. It's like a story. It tells you what are the experiences, what are the lessons learned by AIA, and it's told. The story is told by the people who actually have gone through the process, who have lived through the experience. So I think it's more compelling hearing it from them than from me. And I highly recommend you to take a look at it. Just look at it like a short story. I think it's quite interesting. I highly recommend it.
Great. So yeah, it seems that we've reached the end of our presentation tonight. But before we close this officially, I again would like to remind you, if you'd like to get a certificate, the link is on the chat box. And maybe one last remark from me would be, we have the next event is Digital Risk Management. Is a deep dive on a book with Pak Indra, Pak Insan, and Pak Michael. It's going to be on Wednesday, June 29th, from 7 to 8 p.m. And mungkin Pak Rahmat ada yang mau ditambahin, or Bu Dewi?
Cukup. We just like to thanks Mr. Eddie Chan and also to Pandu for moderating. Other than that, everything is good.
All right. So we
Thank
certainly
you,
hope
everyone.
that our attendees tonight can take away some very important insights. And on behalf of CFA Society Indonesia, Pak Rahmat, Bu Dewi, and Paidi, I would like to thank you again for your time, our attendees. And then, yeah, it's been a pleasure for moderating this event tonight.
Same
Thank
here.
you.
See you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.